Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gridiron Review podcast. I'm Zach, that's Jack, and we are happy to be a part of your NFL offseason coverage. As the draft gets closer, we are going to be covering our mock draft 4.0 and discussing some picks, well, a lot of picks, as a lot of them have changed from previous mocks. And this will be the final mock before our final mock, which will be the night before draft, or the week of the draft. And we're just going to jump right into it with a new first overall pick with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Go ahead, Jack.
With the first overall pick, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Ike Ekwonu, the offensive lineman from North Carolina State. For anyone who looks at our content, you would know that we've had Hutchinson as our first overall pick, I believe, in the last two mock drafts. And this was a much more thought-out discussion after taking a little more time to dig into the Jaguars' depth chart. And it looks like whoever Doug Peterson brought in is switching to a 3-4. And I didn't scout Hutchinson, so I'll let Zach touch on this a little bit. But Hutchinson doesn't seem like he would fit in this 3-4 defense where both of your outside backers are first-round picks in Josh Allen and K'Lavon Chaisson. So this pick for us came down to Ekwonu and maybe a shock to some people, but Kyle Hamilton. And the reason we didn't go Hamilton is because, well, first off, a safety never goes one overall. It doesn't happen. But you look at what they have in the room, Rayshawn Jenkins, Cisco at wing guard, and that's not a bad three if they're all healthy. And obviously, I think that Hamilton is probably better than all three of those. However, Lawrence is a guy that was talked about amongst the likes of Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning. And if you want to see that, you got him the weapons. You got to keep him up right now. And I get that they franchise tag Cam Robinson, but Ekwonu to me probably fits in better as a guard anyway. So it would be Robinson and Taylor as your bookends with Ekwonu and Sheriff as your inside guards, and obviously they need a center, but that can be addressed later. And we just think that the way their offseason is going points that they're all in on Lawrence and trying to help him. But Zach, take it away.
Yeah, so no matter what they do, it feels like this first overall pick is going to be weak. We saw reports that the phone's not ringing for trades, and it's certainly believable. So when you look at Aiden Hutchinson, he's a good prospect. He is not an elite prospect, at least not in my eyes. He could be a double-digit sack guy repeatedly, which is great. But will he be a 20-sack guy? Probably not. When you look at, the Jags pass rush is passable. I mean, the two outside backers are good. I mean, Chaisson hasn't proven anything, but the ends are okay. And it's not like this is Myles Garrett coming out where he's just too good of a talent that you figure it out. Hutchinson is not that guy where he's so good that you have to just take him and figure it out. So I also agree. We talked a long time about this, and Ekwonu can play guard first, and if Cam Robinson finishes this year and you don't want him back, then maybe you can try Ekwonu out at tackle. And I think at the end of the day, much like a couple of our picks later, it's about Trevor Lawrence, and it's about your young quarterback that you committed to, and you have to, first and foremost, you can figure out the defensive stuff later, and you need to make sure he's not hit as many times as he was. And Doug Peterson and I guess Press Taylor, even though he's whatever, were brought in to make Trevor Lawrence work. They have to make him work, and you do that by drafting a lineman first overall. But I'm going to keep it rolling as long as you're cool with that.
Good.
And while Aiden Hutchinson does not go 1, he now goes 2. And I believe we checked, and they had the Lions changing to a 4-3, right?
Correct.
And so this makes a much better fit for Hutchinson. He shouldn't play standing up. He's capable of it, but he doesn't have the speed. And I know people have talked about the arm length, and that's something that some that much like hand size of quarterbacks, some people might be like, oh, that's whatever. But when you're trying to get around the outside from a standing up position, it matters. And so in a 4-3, he can play with his hand in the dirt where his first step is much more utilized. He can get inside, outside before the tackles had time to get their hands on him. And besides the fact that his personality fits Dan Campbell so perfectly. I mean, he's a high motor player who's fiery. Anyone who watches college football or watches the draft off-season coverage knows that there's a video of Hutchinson begging the tackle to take him on and then just bull rushing him. And if that doesn't say Dan Campbell, I don't know what does. The Lions pass rush is okay. They have Charles Harris had a nice year last year, but is it a one-year thing or is he actually figuring it out? Romeo Okwara, Julian Okwara, none of these guys are they're good. They're not amazing. So Hutchinson can easily come in and then he can play inside on passing downs. So, it's an easy fit there. And if you have anything to add to that.
I just want to add that, like, to my eyes, Hutchinson is one of those players that we touched on this topic in one of the previous podcasts. Is he has a narrative around him. This kid could do anything wrong, and they will try to spin it in the right ways. And you look at his combine; it was a 4.7 40, which whatever. Testing isn't everything, but then you watch the on-field drills and like the 8 drill, he did not look fluid in that. He didn't have the bend. He didn't. But yet he still talked about, and then I watched part of the Michigan spring game the other day, and it just kept talking about how do you replace Hutchinson? It's just like, is there anyone else on that team? How about a guy like Dax Hill? How about a guy like David Ojabo? How about their middle linebacker, Josh Ross? And I get Ross isn't a first rounder, but the point is there's other people on this team that make it work. And when it came down to it, if you watch the Orange Bowl, Hutchinson was non-factor against Georgia. Ojabo had a bigger factor. So what is the big deal about this kid?
Yeah, I just want to, before we move to pick 3, again, Hutchinson is a good prospect, not an elite prospect in my eyes. He's for us, he's not even my top edge player. I know I'm in the minority here that I have George Karlaftis as our number 1 edge. And Hutchinson does a lot of things well, but he also is not this generational pass rusher. Like, I saw someone say he could be the 3rd Bosa brother. That's not true. That's just not true. Nick Bosa and Joey Bosa are much more developed coming out of college, and they're just better. And I'm not saying Hutchinson's bad. Could he be a double-digit sack guy? Yeah, but 10 sacks, not 20 sacks. He's never going to get there. And I know that you might not be asking him to do that, but it's just he gets swallowed up in the run game a lot of the time. And there's just with a few other of the top-rated prospects generally accepted, and we'll talk about a few of those like Garrett Wilson, there's a lot of little red flags that people just kind of brush over and just push this, as he said, a narrative that, oh, Hutchinson's the best player in this class. That's not true. Hutchinson's probably back end of the top 10 as far as prospects in this class. But his personality matches up perfectly with Dan Campbell. Can't say that enough. So that's why we think he goes 2. We wanted to look at possibly Sauce here. I think we were debating.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'm sure the interviews, if the Lions have interviewed Hutchinson, which they have gone well between Campbell and Hutch. So we're gonna just assume that that's the pick there. But we're gonna move on to Houston at 3. Go ahead, Jack.
With the 3rd overall pick, we have the Texans taking Evan Neal from Alabama. I mean, this is a pretty obvious pick. With the trade of Deshaun Watson, it's very clear that Davis Mills is your guy, at least for this year. I mean, he showed enough in year 1 for them to be comfortable with moving into this year with him. And if they got to go a different direction later, whatever. But for now, he's your guy. And the truth of the matter is you can point to any position on this team and say, wow, that really needs an upgrade. This is terrible. And I get that they have Tunsil, but Neal is the best, the pure tackle prospect coming out this year. And if you can make him a bookend with Tunsil, you keep Mills off his back. Zach, anything to add?
Yeah, so I think Houston and Atlanta are in very similar situations where some people think they take a tackle, I mean, a quarterback. Now, Mariota's still kind of young, like on the younger side, and Davis Mills showed enough to, there's a lot of there's stats wise, he had the same year as Tua, and yet Tua's job is viewed as secure. So why isn't Mills when he has less talent? I think Houston and Atlanta both need to just build their best team they can. They're nowhere close. Like Atlanta's not close, Houston's not close. So drafting any kind of, drafting a quarterback too early in the rebuild is going to just set it back. So you're right. They get Evan Neal and they put him in the bookend with Tunsil, and then no matter who's there, they're going to not have to worry about guys coming off the edge. So I just think you see if you got a steal in the third round. I think he was third rounder.
I think so, yeah.
And Davis Mills. I mean, coming out of college, he was viewed as a potential sleeper because he just was an unknown with how little he played, and the Texans took a chance, and it looks, at least right now, like they got a steal. So just build the best roster possible and worry about the quarterback at another time. The Jets are at 4. Go ahead.
We had the Jets taking Sauce Gardner. In previous mocks, we've had the Jets taking an O lineman here. But with Neal and Aquanu both off the board, I just think that someone like Cross may be a little bit of a stretch here. And the Jets are in the same division as the Bills and unfortunately sit in the same conference that there's a war going on. So DJ Reed is a fine corner. Bryce Hall had a nice rookie season, but they are not going to survive in the arms race of the AFC. Sauce comes in as the clear number one and hopefully can put that secondary in at least a reasonable spot to compete with at least the Bills in their own division. Zach, anything to add here?
Now, I think, like you said, the Jets would love to get an O lineman here, but it's just Charles Cross versus Sauce Gardner. There's such a difference in value there. And they didn't really do too much to address the defense in free agency. Whereas in the offensive line, the offensive side, they signed multiple linemen, I think, or at least,
If they were backups, but they did go after the two tight ends. So
yeah. So I think, kind of like the Chargers who beefed up the defense, I think they kind of played their hand that they're probably looking at least offensive line / defense, and there's probably not another way they're going to go. So Sauce makes the most sense. And you get, when we were talking about the mock, I think, Jets front office probably sees a Darrelle Revis-like presence potentially in Sauce Gardner. So
moving down the line, the Giants at 5. We had them taking Kyle Hamilton. In our mock 3-0, we had Hamilton falling to the 12th pick. However, we live in a different world than we did 3 seconds just ago. And Hamilton fits into a Giants defense led by Martindale. Martindale, look at Baltimore. They stack their secondary, and you can pull some guy off the street, and Martindale will get him to hit the quarterback. Hamilton is, in our eyes, the best prospect this year. And I know there's a lot of question marks right now surrounding his speed, surrounding what type of upside he has. I just don't understand why you would just let this kid slide. The Giants had 3 starting safeties on their roster as of last year, and now they have 1. And this just seems perfect for Martindale and the Giants, who seem to keep adding to the offensive line, who added a new tight end, whether he's going to be the starter or not. But it just seems like they've lost a couple key defensive pieces, and especially with Bradbury most likely on his way out, Hamilton will at least keep the secondary semi together. If Stingley was still here and he didn't have the health concerns that he did, it's probably Stingley, but for the time being, you create one of the best young safety tandems in McKinney and Hamilton. Anything?
So we had them in our last, I think, 2 mocks taking Malik Willis, and I still think that's a possibility, but there may also be a possibility where they are serious about wanting to let Daniel Jones have the year. And we're going to discuss a trade later on where they'll get their, quarterback to develop. But it's a very strong possibility that they could go Malik Willis. I mean, it fits the mold of what Dable did in Buffalo as the offensive coordinator. However, the owner seems to have been adamant from the get-go that it's about Daniel Jones. It's about giving him a fair shot, and I assume that was discussed when they hired Dable. So we think that the Giants to me are still the major dark horse to take a quarterback, but there's also the real possibility that they're not blowing smoke about wanting to give Daniel Jones a shot. But next, another thing where there's smoke, there might be fire, is Carolina not wanting to take a quarterback at 6. And, when you look at the common mock, including ours, had Kenny Pickett going there because he's a guy who can get the ball to the playmakers because they have a good set of playmakers. Yet there's been repeated reports that they think they can win with Darnold. And how far away are Darnold and Pickett? I mean, certainly Darnold has been, the ghost boy, the turnover machine, the least clutch quarterback in the league, according to some metrics. But, Pickett has a long release too. Pickett also doesn't do anything elite. He does everything fine. And, I could see Carolina worrying about whiffing on this pick. And I also think Carolina, specifically Matt Rule, won't take Malik Willis because he probably doesn't have time to wait for him to work out. And then you've got a coaching change in the middle of trying to develop a quarterback, which is a whole mess. So I think the GM would probably overrule Malik Willis here. And then beyond that, I mean, Sam Howell would be worth the pick in our eyes, but ultimately they probably go with, we have Charles Cross. And Jack, you want to take over here?
Yeah, so we talk about, like, with Houston and not Carolina, with Atlanta, building the best team possible and plugging in a quarterback later. And I get that there's a lot of people who hate Matt Rule. However, I am not one of those people. I am very high on Matt Rule, and I think that he does do some stupid stuff. However, I don't think that you can be judged based on a couple mistakes. When you look at some of the coaches around the league that have – look at Pete Carroll. He's 70 years old, still coaching. Look at the mistakes he's made, yet he's still around. And just look at the Panthers roster. This team is young, and they're ready to win. Brian Burns, Derek Brown, Shaq Thompson, Dante Jackson, J.C. Horn, C.J. Henderson, Chin. Like, you name it, he's put this roster together. And if McCaffrey could stay healthy, maybe that record last year isn't as bad. But the receivers are there. It just seems like he's got pieces everywhere, and he's missing the quarterback. And to Zach's point, he doesn't have time for a rookie to develop. Cross will come in day one. He'll be a starter. He's our second best pure tackle. A little bit weaker in the run game, but really, really solid as a pass blocker. Really nice awareness in blitz pickup and stunts. And look, there's still a lot of names floating in the rumor mill of quarterback movement. Matt Rule needs to find someone who is proven in this league, whether it's Baker or Jimmy Garoppolo. Take your pick here, but he needs to take someone that can take this roster that's ready to win and actually put wins together, because Ghostbuster ain't gonna do it.
So before we move on, I meant to add that Carolina is our favorite to land Baker because, one, they have the cap to take him on in a trade and get a pick with him if that's the route that Cleveland goes. And if they cut him, Carolina has the cap to sign him to the bigger deal than someone like, let's say, if it's Seattle. And I think Baker comes in and he immediately beats out Darnold. And I truly believe that he was misused in Stefanski's offense. And maybe he's an average quarterback. But when you look at, the other similar type of situation where Wentz was tried to fit into the Colts offense, and look how bad that went from a PR standpoint. Wentz had a fine year, and yes, he had a bad end, but we talked about this over and over. Baker, again, in a run-first offense with limited weapons, and I know the whole OBJ experiment was bad, and that was probably Baker's fault. But if you drop him into the Carolina offense with McCaffrey, with DJ Moore, with Terrace Marshall, with Robbie Anderson, and just let him do a quick throw offense, I think he gives you better results than he had in Cleveland. And then you have, a first-round pick and a tackle that, no matter who's playing quarterback, makes the team better. Whereas if you go with Pickett, the hand size thing may be legitimate. He may have issues throwing in NFL football. He could be turnover machine because he can't get a good grip. It's possible. So I think this makes the most sense.
I just want to jump in here again. I was watching a TikTok earlier this week, which I had also sent to Zach. And I mean, make your jokes, but this guy was interviewing Hugh Jackson, and he said something like really smart, which is really funny because of how bad his record was in Cleveland. However, he was saying that the big mistake that coaches make with young quarterbacks is that they're not put into the same system that they excelled in college. You watch their college tape and you watch all this success, and then you wonder why they don't succeed in the pros. And I get that Baker's had some success, but Baker came from Texas Tech and Oklahoma, which were two spread teams, and then you throw him in a 12 personnel offense. It's not the fit for him. And I'm not saying that's everything to be blamed. Obviously there's some coaching stuff going on. There's stuff with Baker that's going on. But if you want to see college Baker, it's most likely going to be in a system like Carolina where they have the receiving weapons and they have a pass catching running back. And I know that this is kind of just an obvious example to use, but look at Mahomes. He comes from an air raid Texas Tech, and you throw him in an air raid Chiefs offense, and he didn't miss a beat, really. I mean, yeah, he sat behind Alex Smith for 2 years, but that was probably the best thing for him. Baker didn't have – he got like half a season behind Tyrod. And then the only other thing I wanted to touch on here was, I don't know if you wanted to bring up the thing you heard about Orlovsky and Pickett.
Oh, just that, yeah. So Dan Orlovsky, when he talks about quarterbacks, I think he's pretty good. When he talks about anything else, I think you just need to, brush it away and don't even pay attention. But what he did say about Pickett is he doesn't have any of the uncoachable traits. When you look at Willis and his athleticism and his arm strength, you can't coach it. His personality, you can't coach it. I would say Sam Howell's athleticism and his deep ball, you can't really coach that. Desmond Ritter's size, his arm strength, his personality, you can't coach it. And Matt Corral's release speed, as much as I don't really care for him as a prospect, you can't coach it. Pickett doesn't have any of those things. And so he was just arguing that while Pickett is a fine prospect, the fact that he doesn't have any of these things severely limits his upside. And I mean, our comp for him is Tannehill. And Tannehill is a fine quarterback in Tennessee, but do you take him with the 6th overall pick? Even if he had a career renaissance in Tennessee the way he has? I don't think so. Probably not. So I think there is something to that. I think, if you sift through all the crap that the analysts say day in and day out, there's a few things that they say that make sense. And in this mock, we'll cover it, but Pickett falls a little bit. And I think that's a true possibility as, again, Carolina may say, look, Matt Rule say I can't screw it up. So going with the veteran, trying again on a different veteran instead of Darnold just makes so much sense. And just going with the best, the prospect that makes your team as better as it can, and an offensive tackle is in desperate need. So yeah, I think, and the one thing I wanted to add before we go on is Baker had a really good run in Freddie Kitchens' offense. And I always thought it was weird that they didn't bring him back. I mean, he broke the record for touchdowns as a rookie and in almost half a season. Mm-hmm. And they didn't bring him back. They went with Stefanski, and Baker's production immediately fell off. Now, granted, it can't all be on Stefanski, but clearly there's not a fit there. So I think you're right. If you allow – Carolina has the personnel to run a spread offense. They do. So if you bring Baker in and you run it and you draft – a 4th-round receiver that can do something that the other 3 don't, a gadgety, like if they drafted Bo Melton in the 5th or the 4th,
Calvin
Like,
Austin in the third.
well, they don't have a third, do they? For
Oh,
the
that's
Sam
right.
Darnold draft.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if Calvin Austin fell to that, I don't know if he will, but if you just draft another receiver that just does everything a little bit differently, then look at all of a sudden you have this really good offense in a division that has only one relevant team.
Two.
From what? Who's the second?
Saints.
Oh, yeah. Well, now they are. Yeah, the Saints did a good job of fixing that whole massacre. But so, and the NFC is much more winnable than the AFC. So Carolina could, if they go get bigger, suddenly I think they're a legitimate playoff team. I think that's now, granted, they might not make it, but I think you could argue that they're easily one of the better teams with that defense, the young defense they have now, and the offensive weapons. They're a quarterback and a couple offensive linemen away from being at least competitive in the NFC. So we could talk all day about some teams like we are going to go to the next pick. We have our massive trade with the Packers going all the way up from 22 to trade with the Giants. So a little bit about this trade before we get into the pick. The Giants have said repeatedly that they want to trade out of this one of the two picks for cap reasons, and they want to cut James Bradbury. And I think that's real. I don't know why they would be saying that otherwise. And this trade allows them to stay in the first but save a ton of money going back to 22. And they get a first round next year. And they get the developmental quarterback in Jordan Love. So the official trade we have is Green Bay sends Jordan Love, pick 122, and a 2023 first to New York. And New York sends pick 7 and a fourth. There might be another pick James Bradbury doesn't make much sense in this trade, I don't think. It could be. There might be a little more to it, but this is our prediction. And Daboll gets Jordan Love, who, from a physical standpoint, was very, very similar to Josh Allen coming out of college. A rocket arm, severe accuracy issues with a lot of athleticism for his size. Now, Green Bay has really been sheltering of Jordan Love, where you haven't seen him much, and what you've seen has been, I would argue, an early Josh Allen. A lot of wow plays, a lot of head scratchers, and you could argue that Josh Allen partially got better because of how much he was able to play and work through his mistakes, and Jordan Love hasn't been afforded that. So we have Green Bay trading up to have their pick of the receivers because, truth be told, Green Bay can't screw around anymore. They just signed Rodgers to this mega deal. They have nobody besides Amari Rodgers and Allen Lazard to catch passes, and they go up, and we have them taking Chris Olave. Now, some people might raise their eyebrow at this because you could argue Chris Olave is missing. See, for us, he has the elite trait in his route running, but some people might think this is for Garrett Wilson, and maybe some people think this could be for someone like Burks. But for us, it's Chris Olave, and the reason is as simple as this. Not often is there a prospect in a draft that can replace an all-pro and play such a similar role as Olave can to Devontae. Will Olave reach the lofty standards of Devontae? I don't know. He's a very, very, very good route runner. He's faster than Devontae, and his hands are elite. So we were talking about this, and it's the money ball that you don't replace a player with a player, you replace a player with production. But this is one of the rare cases where if they make this trade, they can replace a player with a player and at least have the idea that there's not much of a beat missing in the offense. And they're able to keep one of their other firsts to double dip if there's someone there that they like. But Jack, I'm sure you have something to add to this, or?
No, you're good. You covered it pretty well.
All right. So this will, this may be a reach of a trade, but it makes a lot of sense. Green Bay can't afford to screw around, and if they wait until where their two firsts are, they could miss out on the first cropping of wide receivers, and then what? Then you're grabbing guys with different red flags, and you're looking at, playing Rodgers for what? So now you can have people stop complaining about the whole first round touchdown receptions that Rodgers has thrown, and you get an elite route runner. The next we have Atlanta. When we we discussed this pick. It's really seems like a trade out for Atlanta because Seattle at 9 is probably on rightfully looking quarterback, but they should probably go in another direction. But trying to find a trade partner is difficult. Pittsburgh makes some sense, but I don't know that they have the ammo to move up. I mean, it's a decent sized jump. I don't know if Atlanta would take a first this year and next. I don't know if Pittsburgh would even do that. So for it's certainly possible that Atlanta trades out, but in this scenario, we have them not able to find the deal that they're looking for, and we have them going with Treylon Burks. He has fallen a little bit in the draft process because of his 40. However, I remain that his speed is long and that he just takes a little bit longer to get there. And even still, he has the size and the weight to bully corners. So I'm not too concerned. His testing in general was average, but for me, you can use him in a different ways. He can take some jet sweeps, he can take some bubble screens, and he still has the speed to build up to get by people, and he can bulldoze them. He's got that size to just dismantle corners if he plays to his strengths. And as Jack noted when we were discussing this, Atlanta may see some shades of Julio in him. And I'm not saying he's Julio. I'm saying he's got the similar build with the speed and the size. Julio is faster, Julio's a little bigger, but Burks also is massive for a wide receiver, and he does have good speed. And his hands are very good. So, Jack, you want to add anything to this?
I mean, again, it's like Houston. Point at anything and it's an issue. But if you look at Atlanta's moves so far, it's Mariota who has the mobility aspect. Mike Davis is still there. They brought back Patterson. They brought in Damian Williams. They brought Demir Bird. That actually doesn't help my point, so I'm not sure why I put that on. But the point is they have 3 running backs now. So you got to imagine Smith is trying to find a committee that is going to make this offense rely on the run. But even as such, Cordero on passing downs can kick out. Damian Williams can be the pass catching back out of the backfield, assuming he doesn't get kicked out wide. And then there's Burks, who will step in and be the big receiver. And if you look at what Arthur Smith did in Tennessee on passing downs, it was RPO and short stuff to be able to get Tannehill in a groove and to get all these weapons that you can just put the ball in their hands and they'll make the most of it. I don't see why it's not Burks, and I guess you could argue Garrett Wilson, but as Zach stated earlier, there's minor red flags that people are ignoring, and it could create a larger issue than you see on tape.
Real quick before we move on, you talked about Arthur Smith running his offense. Our comp for Treylon Burks is actually A.J. Brown, and I know that's a common comp, but it's you see it. So he can just plug in his version of A.J. Brown, or at what he hopes to be his version of A.J. Brown, and work towards making this offense, if Mariota is not the answer, just a drop-in for someone else instead of having, if they draft the quarterback here, they're pushing this down another year, and I just think that's a mistake. But the Seahawks at 9, doing a true Seahawks move here, we have them taking Malik Willis, and while that's not a bad pick on the surface, Seattle has not signed, to our knowledge, a veteran quarterback to mentor anyone. And, was Seattle responsible for developing Russell Wilson, or was he just that good and his size dropped him in the draft? It's unknown. They have not proven that they can develop. Not that they've had to, but they've never had a backup stick. And we think this might be a mistake pick just because there's other needs that they could address. However, you can let Drew Lock play the year out and see what you got in him while Malik Willis sits and continues to learn. The only thing I thought about while I was writing this up is Pete Carroll willing to go through with this? Is he willing to sit while another quarterback develops instead of drafting a position to help win now? But my counter to that is, when has Seattle ever done anything reasonable when drafting in the first round? So if you have anything more you want to talk about with this.
Seattle is in a very weird spot because their players are saying we're not tanking, we can win games, and you trade Russell Wilson and you cut Bobby Wagner. So I mean, to me, that it screams rebuild. Their D line is rough. There's a lot of parts of this team that are rough. Um, I mean, safety. All jokes aside, I mean, Adams does have some positives about him. You're talking one of the better safety tandems, one of the better receiver duos. There's positives here. I don't know if you're ready to win this year, especially not with the way that the Rams and the 49ers are and the pieces that they've added. So maybe Seattle isn't in rebuild, but they are thinking for the future, which maybe that's why Willis is the pick here. But to Zach's point, you need to go get a veteran free agent at that point if you're going to do that. You don't add anything else? So you good?
Nope.
All right. Moving down the line. So we had the Jets skip on O-line with their first pick, and it comes back now. We had the Jets taking Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M. And Green was a prospect I didn't get to look at before the combine hit. And he fell pretty heavily down my board after what was probably one of the worst O-line combines I've watched in a very long time. And so when it came time to watch his film, I was like, oh, well, great. I'm going to fall asleep. This is going to be terrible. Quite the opposite. I was really, really impressed with Kenyon Green. And I mean, he's listed as a guard by most people, and he worked out as a center as a pro day. But quite honestly, I thought that his best film was at tackle. And by no means is he a perfect prospect, but I definitely think that there's a lot of upside here if you get the right coach to work with him. But he is a plug-and-play player. And for the Jets, he most likely comes in and at the very least competes for one spot on that line. And if they think he needs to sit for a year for whatever reason, your sixth man can literally play all five spots across the line. So I don't know why you wouldn't want that if you're in New York. But I'm sure that he'll find a starting spot somewhere on the Jets line. And to our point of Davis Mills, the Jets go out and protect their young quarterback in Zach Wilson, who at the end of the day, down the stretch, did actually look to show a lot of promise. Zach, anything to add here?
No, you covered it. The goal is to protect Zach Wilson, and this will do it.
Moving down the line, pick 11, we had the Commanders taking Drake London. I don't think this has changed in any of the mocks.
I don't think so. The only thing I want to add is I saw a report today that Ron Rivera traveled to the Ohio State Pro Day, and he rarely does this. So it seems that they're in love with the Ohio State receivers. I heard specifically Olave, but for this one, he's gone, and I know Garrett Wilson is high on a lot of people, but on a lot of people's board, but Drake London is the better fit with what they're looking to do. He pairs so well with McLaurin, and he's a big target for Wentz to throw to. But we'll keep moving to the Vikings with Derek Stingley.
We just think that this is a good pick. I think this is a very quality value pick. I've said it multiple times through our mock draft series that without the injury concern, Stingley is arguably the best prospect coming out this year. And if he didn't have the injuries, I think that there's a serious conversation that he's the undoubted number one pick this year. And again, much like Hamilton, it's kind of weird to take someone in the secondary with the first overall pick. But if you watch college football and watch what Derek Stingley did as a true freshman at LSU against the top-notch SEC competition, there's no reason. And people say, oh, well, his play declined. It was most likely injury related because you don't just fall off the map like that. And Minnesota is, for the most part, a fairly well put together team. And the secondary is just, it's old. That old or unproven. And Stingley will step in and be the two behind Pat Pete. And if he doesn't play a lot this year, you still – I don't know who their second corner is. Not even going to attempt that right now. But at least Stingley's not in a rush to be the one. And, I mean, hopefully he can stay healthy. But at this point, you just kind of got to take a chance on the risk here. You can't let a prospect like that fall. Anything?
No, I'm good. We'll just go with the Texans, doubling down on O-line and taking Tyler Linderbaum.
This is a similar situation to the Jets in our last mock. You double down on protecting a quarterback. Houston, at the end of the day, I get they play in a weak AFC South offense or division, but the defense isn't going to be fixed by one pick. And I get you have your pick of premier edge rushers here in our number one Karlaftis or the upside of Walker or anything. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be playing from behind, I would much rather have my quarterback protected than one edge rusher. So, I mean, Linderbaum is a center, and there's reports, and I can see it, that he could be an all-pro caliber center starting his rookie year. And I think they need that, whether I know they re-signed Justin Britt, but he can kick the guard too. So it doesn't matter what combination you want to do here. But at the end of the day, if you can get Tunsil, Linderbaum, and Neal to be your protectors for Davis Mills, you at least have some sort of chance, defense or not. Anything?
No, we have Baltimore taking Jordan Davis, and I think we may have had this before in different mocks. Baltimore's pick switches up depending on where we have Jordan Davis going. But for us, Jordan Davis is at the same time one of the safest prospects in the draft while also having one of the biggest upsides. And everyone knows by now he won the combine basically. And he's an elite run defender, but he offers so much as a pass rusher that has been untapped. And they add an anchor that can solidify the center of the D line while their pass rushing linebackers work on the outside.
The only thing I want to add there is that Baltimore did re-sign Calais Campbell since we made that pick. I just think that's even better because Campbell and Davis, no guard or center wants to see that. And especially if Davis can learn under a guy like Calais Campbell, who knows what's going to happen there. But moving down the line, this is another pick where it's a situation of if there's smoke, there's fire. And we have them taking Sam Howell. And Zach, I'll just let you take this one.
So the Eagles made the trade with the Saints last week or earlier this week. And I think a lot of people assume that means they're going to wait and see how Jalen Hurts does. But then Jack said to me that after they made the trade, they had a top 30 visit with Matt Corral. So for me, this means that, the Eagles aren't in a place to really trade out. Like, it's not one of those things where you try to lure a team to give up too much. I mean, it could be, I guess, but at 15, that's a weird spot to try and do that. So I think the Eagles have multiple plans. I think they have a few people on their board, and they have, a moldable draft strategy. And I think if Howell is there, he's their guy. And if he's not, they have a first next year now to make a move for a quarterback. I no longer think that they trade up. I mean, I think there's a small possibility, but for the most part, I think they're staying put and letting the board fall to them. If, someone like Jordan Davis falls to them, I'm sure they're happy. If Kyle Hamilton falls to them, I'm sure they're very happy. And I think if one of the top two corners falls to them, they're happy. This could be receiver, but, they drafted one in the first last year, and I'm just not a believer in Hurts. I know he's been working hard, but the stuff that he has issues with, I just don't know if that can be learned. The lack of anticipation as a quarterback, the inability to see the deep safety, things like getting glued on your first reads you can work on, but when you get into the game, is it gonna change? And I just don't know that his flaws are coachable. It's possible. I mean, he certainly works hard, but to me, Howell runs the same offense that you do with Hurts, just as a much better thrower. He's got in my eyes, a similar level of athleticism, maybe slightly below, but he has a better arm. He's a much more accurate passer, and he brings a similar level of character and leadership that Hurts does. So I think Philly does one of the biggest trolls of the draft, where they trade with the Saints, and they get the guy that the Saints might want the most right in front of them. So I just think that Philly has probably, I would say, 5 guys that they want to take with this pick, and whichever one is there, they're going to go with. Is there anything you want to add before we?
We're good.
All right. So this is the newly acquired pick for the New Orleans Saints, and we have them taking Desmond Ridder. This trade that they made is curious because they gave up all of this to not get into the top 10 and have their pick of the quarterbacks, even though the trade package, you could argue, may have been able to do that. So for us, that means they're making this trade with one player in mind, or maybe two players, and two that they're confident will be within striking distance. And in my eyes, that's Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder. Ridder is a borderline first rounder in my eyes, but his personality and his leadership can easily get me to believe that a team will fall in love with him. And he has shown the ability to develop. And since you had Jameis Winston there, there's no rush for him to get on the field. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think for the Saints cap situation, at some point they're going to want a quarterback on a rookie deal. Jack, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that, well, first off, we've talked about it. Like, Ridder and Winston are pretty similar players. But the fact for us is that Ridder is kind of like a borderline first, but he's in a situation where he can sit 2 years, and they did sign Andy Dalton, so it's not like he's waiting to get mentored by somebody. Dalton is going to be sitting there mentoring, and it goes back to what we were talking before about with the quarterbacks is, if you just signed Winston to this deal, you're not taking Pickett here because Pickett is going to play now. You need to take your chances on the upside here, because down the line, Pickett may be a fine quarterback somewhere, but he's not going to give you the upside that Ridder does if he gets to sit.
So speaking of that, when you look at, obviously Willis's upside is unmatched, but when you look at Pickett and you look at Ridder, right? So Howell's upside to me is Russell Wilson. Ridder's upside could be someone like Big Ben. And what's Pickett's upside? Because I think, like we talked about, it's Ryan Tannehill. And I think of those three listed, Tannehill is so far below. And I think this is part of the reason why we have Pickett falling, is that teams, like coaches that are comfortable where they're at. Dennis Allen, I don't think has to worry about getting fired in a year. I think he's going to bet on the upside here. And the same goes for Philly. I don't think there's any worry about anyone getting fired there. So they can afford to bet on the upside instead of the safe floor play. And all the while, they have both Philly and the Saints have starters on their roster. And they don't have to worry about, I'm not a Hurts believer, but even if it's not Hurts, it's Minshew. And I think, there's something to that where you don't have to force your rookie on there too early. But we'll just keep going with the Chargers. They, in this offseason, loaded up on defense. J.C. Jackson, Khalil Mack, and they signed two separate tackles in Austin Johnson and Sebastian Joseph Day.
Yes.
So they did everything right to stir up the defense in the massive shootout bloodbath that's going to be the AFC West. So here is where they address the offense. We have them taking Garrett Wilson, and I think the Chargers are jumping up and down. I personally am not the biggest Garrett Wilson as the number one overall wide receiver fan. However, he does a lot of things for you. He's a good route runner. He's got good speed. He's above average in both of, or he's better than good in both of those. His hands are iffy, but he is absolutely elite after the catch. And I think that's an element on the offense that the Chargers don't have. Keenan Allen is one of the best route runners in the league and has some of the surest hands. Mike Williams is a massive target at 6'5" and a very good down the field weapon, but neither one of them are too elusive, and neither one of them have, take the top off speed. And Garrett Wilson gives you both of that, and just makes, for me, Chargers the favorite for the bloodbath of the West, I think. And I don't think it's, if they do this, this might be a hot take, it might not be. I don't think it'd be particularly close because of how much they've addressed the defense, where teams like the Broncos and the Chiefs and, the Raiders are viewed, I think, as the fourth team, although they should still be one of the better teams in the AFC, have kind of not really addressed the defense too much. I know the Raiders signed Chandler Jones, but so for me, this pick is just, they're running it to the podium. And I think this is, for fit to team with skill set, one of the bigger steals of the draft. Is there anything you want to add in?
No.
So the Eagles have their second first rounder out of 2 now, and we have them passing on a wide receiver because I think we talked about it. They could take a wide receiver, but I think there's more wide receivers than there is edge. And I know they signed Barnett back, and Reddick plays a little bit different of a role, but we have them taking George Karlaftis. He is our edge one. He's very flexible. He can play standing up, he can play at end, and he can play inside. He has, to me, an elite blend of speed and power. I mean, he compared himself to Khalil Mack, and while I wouldn't go as far to say as he's there now, I see the upside. I see an upside of a J.J. Watt, or I think he's a different player than a Khalil Mack, but I see massive upside. I think he is a much more high potential prospect than Aiden Hutchinson, and just because he didn't have that production, I think. And when you watch the tape, I've said this before, he was double and triple teamed constantly. I mean, his first step off the line is hard to miss. He's so quick for a guy his size. And the Eagles love their pass rushers. You know, they never draft a linebacker in the first round, but you know what they do draft routinely in the draft up and down is pass rushers, edge rushers, T tackles, and Karlaftis is a little bit of everything. Barnett, I don't expect to start. I know they signed him back, but I think Josh Sweat and Reddick start. And then I think you have, you know, Fletcher Cox on a 1-year deal. Milton Williams showed promise, but Karlaftis is just another guy into their rotation. And I think the Eagles want a bigger receiver to pair with Devontae Smith. So I think if hypothetically Burks or London were here, I think that might be the pick. But I don't think they go after someone like Jameson Williams because I don't think it matches. But, I mean, to me, you can't go wrong with either one of those. For me, it's the edge.
I just want to add here, first off, there were so many reports before he tore his Achilles that the Eagles are in love with Ojabo. And from what Zach has told me, it doesn't make sense. It's not a fit. In terms of other prospects they're in love with, McDuffie. McDuffie is a guy that's climbed up my board a little bit in the last couple of weeks. And obviously the Eagles need corner help. However, it's, again, when do the Eagles ever take a super need in the first round? If Karlaftis is sitting here, I just don't know how, with Brandon Graham aging and Fletcher Cox on a 1-year deal, you don't go get this guy with huge upside and, first off, continue your flow of edge and D linemen in the first round, but let him work with Fletcher Cox and let him work with Graham before they retire or go elsewhere or whatever the case may be here. And the only other thing I wanted to add here, and to Zach's point, is can you imagine if Philly had their own Greek freak? Come on.
Yeah, Philly fans would definitely – I think I mentioned that when we were working on this mock, and it makes sense. And another thing, Karlaftis' 40 was really good, but he ran it shirtless in 23 degrees. How is that not a Philly guy? Like, it just screams it, and I just read a report that Philly actually held a private workout with him. So I really think he screams Philly, and the fans will take to him, and I think – you know, this will be, like you said, another case where Philly passes up a dire need and just sticks to what they do. And that's always, they always want to have a good pass rush. And they address the linebacker in free agency with Kaiser White. They're not going to take a linebacker in the first round. It's just not going to happen. It wasn't going to happen before. It's certainly not going to happen now. The only other position I could see, I mean, like you said, Trent, I think secondary is certainly a possibility, but it's reported that they're the favorites for Tyrann Mathieu, I think.
Yeah,
So,
I heard that too.
So they just go with the super value here. I think Karlaftis is a steal at this pick.
I just want to throw in real quick that for the Eagles, getting Howell and Karlaftis is like, that's like an A+ in our books. However, to some people that's not. So like, this just fits like the MO of Howie Roseman being this trade specialist who can't hit on anything.
Yeah, but I mean, it's probably if you look at, you know, one of the lovely people at NFL Network, these two picks might be graded a C or a B-, probably a C. But for us, you're right, it would be an A+ because, you know, Karlaftis is not being talked about Hutchinson, but why? You know, his physicals match up very similarly. His pro day was great from what I read, and his pass rushing moves are more diverse. He's got more speed than like on tape than Hutchinson does, and he's just as powerful. And he's got more flexibility because he actually can play standing up, and I don't think Hutchinson can. And I just, it's one of those things where I see Karlaftis and you see through the production, and I think there's a lot of potential. And the Eagles, who drafted really well last year, continue this new trend of being very smart. And the trade out of the one pick and getting a first and all the other picks next year is security. If the quarterbacks don't fall right, guess what? They take a wide receiver and they take an edge, and then they look at the quarterbacks next year. It's so smart. Like, Howie Grossman gets a lot of shit for drafting, but as we talked about before, as far as we know, that could have been Doug Peterson.
Yeah.
And because Peterson always seems to want to have a power struggle, hashtag Jacksonville. Roseman is wicked smart with trades. I mean, there might not be a better guy in football right now at trades. So I think he's probably a lot. I was a anti-Roseman for a while, but when you look through the lines, I mean, it makes sense. This is an amazing trade that you pulled off way before draft day, so you can adjust your strategy, and you're so safe here. Like I said, if the quarterbacks don't fall right, well, guess what? You get 2 players to make the team better, and you have 2 firsts next year. I would love to have 2 firsts every year, and they have all the extra picks that they got. So the Saints now are up and with their second first this year, and we have them taking Jameson Williams. They got their quarterback. Now they desperately need wide receiver. Beyond Michael Thomas, if he ever plays again, I mean, who knows? He could hurt something while training and just sit out the whole year. I don't know. Their group is thin. Callaway showed flashes, but who knows if that was actual skill or if that was out of desperation. Deontay Harris, or whatever his name is now, I forget what he changed it to. Deontay Hardy is a nice return man. Does he offer more as a wide receiver? He had a decent year, but I don't know if it's, again, was it out of skill or out of necessity? So the Saints get a pretty good deal here. Jameson Williams, by all accounts, is way ahead of schedule. He offers a ton of speed, a really good route running, not much under or after the catch as far as elusiveness, but it's Winston. Winston is a great deep ball thrower. He's fearless. A guy like Williams can really pair well with him, and Michael Thomas can work the underneath and the intermediate routes. You got anything you want to add to the Williams pick?
The only thing I want to say is that I think Williams at the end of the day could be what they hoped Emmanuel Sanders was going to be a couple years back. And at the end of the day, I don't remember what your comp for him was, but if you look at Williams and Thomas, I really don't think that's all that far off from what Winston had in Evans and Godwin. So
my comp for Williams, I think, is Terry McLaurin. So yeah, I mean, that's, then you're pairing an elite route runner with really good hands with an elite route runner that has a lot of speed. Michael Thomas has got a little bit of size. It's a great one too. And maybe Troutman finally figures out his pass catching ability. And, now Marquez Callaway or Deontay Hardy or whoever is your number 3. So I think this really works out well for the Saints, whose defense, in my opinion, is pretty much set. I was
going to say that's the top group in the league, I think.
Yeah, I don't think they made this trade with defense in mind. I think they have quarterback and offensive weapon, wide receiver probably.
Yeah.
One thing, speaking of that, according to Jack, there's not really a tackle here that matches the value of Jameson Williams. It could be tackle, but we both agree it'd probably be a reach here. So Jameson Williams is a true value here, especially if he continues to be ahead of schedule. Pittsburgh is up next, and they stop the slide on Kenny Pickett. This is in a way, a dream scenario for Pittsburgh, who continuously is adamant that they want to add bodies to the quarterback room. And now with the tragic passing of Dwayne Haskins, they are another guy short. And I think they are a team that wants to trade up, but I just don't know that there's a partner there unless they give up a crazy trade, a stupid trade. So they sit tight and the board falls to them, and they get Kenny Pickett, who in a way is a similar skill set to Mitchell Trubisky. It was not my comp. Like I said, my comp is Tannehill, but I mean, Tannehill and Trubisky athletic quarterbacks without the strongest arm in the world, decently accurate, who all, both need career renaissances in another team. I think Pickett is a big easy sell for Pittsburgh because he's the local kid. And, is he, as we talked about it repeatedly, is he high upside? I don't know, but Pittsburgh's weapons suggest that they don't need a massive upside. I mean, they were a playoff team for a couple of years with rag arm Ben Roethlisberger there. So even an average quarterback, I think, makes their offense flow much better. And he's got the mobility, as Trubisky does, to mask the offensive line better than Ben did. There's not too much to go in here. I think this is one of those things where just the board falls right to them. They have a lot of holes across the defense, but they can't pass up Pickett here.
The only thing I would like to add here is that the Steelers stopped the slide much like Kenny Pickett did. I don't know if he did that intentionally or not, but
I did not, but that
is all.
The Patriots are up next with our second mock in a row. We have them taking Kayvon Thibodeau. I know the value in edge rusher in this draft is high, but for that same reason, edge rushers could fall. And I am not a fan of Thibodeau. I think athletically he's got upside, but I think, he skill-wise is underdeveloped and not nearly as ready as scouts want to say. As people like Jeremiah or Bucky Brooks, who are in love with him, say, Thibodeau's not polished. He has limited pass rushing moves. Most of the time it looked like he was just fine engaging the tackle without trying anything. And it wasn't like in an Aiden Hutchinson way where it seemed like he was setting him up. It just seemed like he was content with setting the edge as a run defender, even though it wasn't a run. And on top of this, he continuously is saying things that just make me wince. And it came out, Good Morning Football misquoted it, where they said, I forget what they quoted, but Thibodeau responded to them on Twitter saying what he actually said is, I don't need a coach telling me what I did wrong when I do things wrong, or something along those lines, which isn't much better in my eyes, in our eyes. I mean, it's basically saying he's like an I know player who just says, I know when you tell him something, when a coach tells him something he did wrong or he's critiqued, which I don't think coaches want that. I don't think coaches want to hear, I know, because then the responsibility will do it right the first time. And it's, he just doesn't seem to be able to answer these questions well. And I know a lot of people said that his combine interviews were, they like the confidence, but there is a point where it is just too much for a player that has been as highly regarded as him, but yet hasn't had the year that you expect. And he had fine years in college. He did not have, elite level. And I think you could see him slide. People still haven't gone top 5, but I would be real nervous doing that. If I was like Houston or if I was Detroit, I would be really nervous taking a guy that feels as though he knows everything. And I know that's not what he probably means, but his interviews at the combine and after, the amount of times he's responding to people on social media already, and he's not even in the pros yet, it's just super concerning. But his upside is there, and I think New England is the perfect spot to develop him both on the field and in the media and off the field. I don't want to add more to that, but that's just my feelings. I just think he's got a lot of upside, but he needs some humility.
The only thing I want to add here is that Thibodeau is another player with a narrative around him, which is why these people that continuously make mock drafts, whether you're an analyst, a professional, or someone like us that does this because we love it, Thibodeau continues to be in the top 5 or the top 10, whatever you want to say. And I think it's because people aren't thinking for themselves. I think it's because people are listening to what these analysts are saying, and they want to be right rather than actually give an opinion on what they believe of him. And I mean, for me, the big thing about Thibodeau is you look at the combine, and I know we've talked about this multiple times, but all week he told teams, I'm going to participate in everything. And then he gets there, he runs the 40, and he calls it a day. Or I think he benched too, but whatever. And so now you just lied to the teams, and then you come up with some lame excuse like, oh, well, I didn't want to have to wait for the linebackers to be done, which you wouldn't have had to because the transition drills were right after the edge drills. But then I remember Willie McGinnis went over to talk to him to figure out what happened, and they're like, oh, well, after commercial break, we'll go to Willie. And then they went to Willie with no Thibodeau, and if you listen to what McGinnis was saying, he was covering for the kid. There's no doubt in my mind that he was covering for him, and they didn't want to ruin this narrative they have around this kid that's been talked about since high school. And I didn't look at the film. I'm going to leave that to Zach. But the truth of the matter is, yeah, the upside seems to be there. But are you really willing to take that chance on a kid who already seems to have concerns around his effort and around his ability to speak to people? And like, I guess the joke here could be that he'll be the robot that Belichick wants, but you can't bail him out forever.
Yeah, one thing I just want to add is it's a similar way as Pickett is for me. Now, Pickett is not as bad in the media, but Pickett also has this cockiness that, yeah, he had a good year, but he did not have an elite year. Like, people talk about like the Joe Burrow cockiness. Joe Burrow had a crazy season. I mean, one for the record book season where he took down elite team after elite team, and Pickett had a good season at Pitt. Like, had a very good season at Pitt, and Thibodeau had a good season, not an elite season. He did not have, I think he never topped out over 8 sacks. And for a guy as talked about and as highly regarded as he has been for years, you just thought at some point would have that defining season as a college player that was like, yeah, this is why he has been talked about. And he never had it. And I just think his upside is there, but maybe he doesn't fall this far. I mean, maybe we're overreacting a little bit, but I'm not going to be shocked if he's not a top 10, even a top 15 pick. I think in general, the edges are going to fall because the value is there even beyond the first rounders. So I think other teams are going to take other needs like offensive linemen, how we have the Texans double dipping, where there's not as much deep into the draft value. And 2, there's other edges that offer similar, if not more upside without as much as in the media. The
nonsense around them.
Yeah, as much as Thibodeau's been in the media, and he's responding to people on Twitter, and it's like there's ways to say what you want to say, but so much different with a so much better perception. You can say you think you're the best person in the draft without saying, I'm shocked I'm not the best player in the draft. There's different ways to say it, and it's not like it was a one-time thing. It's over and over and over, and no one is coaching him up. Or maybe they're trying, or maybe he just doesn't want it. We don't know. But
just say what you want to say through your play. He keeps this whole stupid thing, well, let me pull out the tape for you. I'll show you the tape too. We'll show you exactly what the problem is.
Yeah. So we're not going to stick on this, and we are not, hating on Thibodeau just because. This is just our opinion that if we were a GM or us, his interviews would just I would love to know, and obviously you can't, how the top 30 visits go. I would love to know if it's even brought up because we are not GMs. We don't know how much this is concerning them. But for the record, I can't think of another first round prospect that has been this way in like the last couple of years as social media presence has grown and grown. I can't think of another prospect that has been as I don't even know how to describe, as I am the best in this draft. I can't believe I'm not regarded by many as the best as he is. And to us, it's not a good look. And you may think differently, and that's fine. But for us, this is causing him to fall on top of, in our eyes, a lot more development than people want to say. But we're going to move on from this. And we have the Giants up, and this is part of the trade back that they did, and we have them taking Jermaine Johnson. Wig Martindale likes his versatile pass rushers, and Jermaine Johnson played end at Florida State, stood up as an edge rusher, and worked out with the linebackers at the combine. You can't get much more versatile than that. he is an elite run defender who can start right away or at least be part of the rotation that they have. And he can develop as a pass rusher while he contributes value as a run defender. And he can drop into coverage if you asked him to. I wouldn't do it a lot, but he certainly showed at the combine with his positional drills as a linebacker that he's capable. Do you want to touch on that?
The only thing I want to add is you lost Austin Johnson and you lost Lorenzo Carter. Johnson can fill both of those roles in a rotational package. There's no reason why the Giants, especially with Martindale at the helm of the defense now, don't take a versatile player here.
For that matter, I think, it's probably a versatile diva lineman between Johnson or Devontae Wyatt. I think it could be either one, but I think looking at how Baltimore drafted, it's always seems to be an edge rusher first, and then whatever else you need to fill in after. So I think Jermaine Johnson is the pick, and I think he's a good pro. Maybe his pass rushing upside is a little limited, but he's one of the few edge rushers in this draft that has some upside, but also already has an elite trait that you can see on film. The Cardinals are up next, and we have them taking Sky Moore. I was extremely skeptical on Sky Moore due to how much Daniel Jeremiah and all these guys talked about him at the combine. Most of the time when they just talk about these prospects, there's usually red flags. Like Bucky Brooks talked about Greg Dulcich as like the best tight end in this class. Dulcich is a fine prospect. He is not the best tight end in this class. He is not the most upside. It's not even close. He's a safe pick for sure. And you see it with other guys that they talked about. And Sky Moore was one of them that they just talked. However, you look at the tape. I got to look into his game film, and I see it. He is an elite, or he's a high-end route runner. Playing smaller school guys, it's hard to see how he would go up against elite level talent, but he uses a lot of stutter steps, head fakes, hip fakes, all that stuff that you want to see. He's got good hands from what I can tell. Again, there's limited tape on him because he went to such a small school in Western Michigan. And where he really is elite is after the catch. You use him on jet sweeps, bubble screens. He's going to make people miss. Funny enough, they kept talking about finding the next Deebo Samuel at the combine. They said it about Burks. They said it about almost everyone. I think Sky Moore has that potential. Is he as elusive as Deebo? I don't think so, but the same role is possible. And Arizona, we know they have Rondale, but Rondale can, Sky Moore is more than just a gadget, as Deebo is a legitimate receiver, and Rondale can play the gadget. And then you have like a lot of possibilities between Sky Moore, Rondale, and then obviously DeAndre. And the one thing I want to add is Hopkins is hurt, as Jack noted, more and more, and they need another person there. And I think Sky Moore has more upside than someone like Christian Kirk. So do you want to add anything?
We're good.
All right. We have Dallas up next, and a team famous for saying or ignoring anything that anyone says and just going with who they think. So, Jack, you want to cover this pick?
Yeah. We have Dallas taking Andrew Booth. Andrew Booth is not a prospect that I am high on. I think I've mentioned this multiple times. I don't even think he was the starter on Clemson. And that's the first red flag, because in the snaps that he was in on, I was not thoroughly impressed. If you can get a guy like Trent McDuffie here, that's absolute value, and you could, but it's Jerry Jones. We think that he most likely takes the pick with athletic upside, and whether you hit or not, who knows? But I mean, if you watch an Andrew Booth highlight reel, it is unreal some of the plays that he makes, and I can see why people are in love with him. I think that there's a lot of technical issues wrong here, and I don't know. Andrew Booth and Trayvon Diggs could give up the most yards in the league. I think that'd be fun to watch. That's why people watch college football, right?
Yeah, though I think we were joking. They'll lead the league in interceptions, pick sixes, yards given up, and touchdowns given up.
Moving down the line here, here's Trent McDuffie to Buffalo. McDuffie comes from a Washington team that runs what seems to be 90%, if not 95% zone. And the reason McDuffie was low on my board originally was because there was not enough man coverage tape. But I went back and watched a little bit more, and he might not have the athletic upside that Booth does, but he's a very technical player, and the way his technique shows out in the film, and just like some of the minor things show that he could be a good man coverage cornerback. But at the end of the day, if you watch the Bills and the Chiefs shootout, their secondary was Swiss cheese. And if you're going to continue to run heavy zone, at least draft the guy that can play zone extremely well. But at the end of the day, McDuffie should be able to be arguably the third best cornerback out of this class. And who better to learn man from than Trey White? So anything good?
Now, people that, it could be a receiver. This could be like a dark horse Breece Hall pick, but as we've talked about before, this has been the same pick. Buffalo didn't lose the playoff game because they were missing an offensive weapon. They lost it because their defense got shredded. So a corner just they need a corner, and they didn't address it in free agency. So, put 2 and 2 together. The Tennessee Titans are up next. We have them taking Devontae Wyatt. This is the same position as before, but a different player. We have them taking Travis Jones. Wyatt offers a little bit more flexibility. They still need a tackle no matter what. And this might be a chance at Matt Corral, but Tennessee has to view their window as closing, and Corral does nothing to help them win now. Does he extend the window? Maybe, but to me, it could be a receiver as well. However, deep tackle is such a glaring need that Devontae Wyatt offers a lot of flexibility. He offers a nice blend of run defense and pass rush. Although I don't think he's an elite pass rusher, he can learn. And I think they can get a receiver. Again, receiver is so deep in this draft. They could get one in later rounds that fills out their core. Do you want to touch on that at all?
I mean, there's no reason Wyatt and Jeffrey Simmons can't be the best young duo in the D-line spot. That's it.
And Wyatt and Simmons both can play end if you need them to. That's another. So there's a lot of flexibility. So the Buccaneers are up next. We have them taking Trayvon Walker. So for me, I think the hype got out of hand a little bit. I think his athletic testing was off the charts. I think he played DB drills, or he did DB drills at the pro day, which is insane. However, this man is about as raw as a prospect comes. And for someone to mock him 1 overall, to me, is just, as I've had time to think about it, it's insane. And Walker might have the most potential out of anyone, but I mean, there is just nothing on tape that suggests he's anything more than an athletic effort pass rusher, which is, it's a knock because I think he's barely been in the game, and he just needs a lot of time. I mean, to me, our comp is Rashawn Gary, with more positional flexibility than Rashawn Gary, but in the same way how the Packers had him sit behind Za'Darius and Preston Smith for 2 years to develop, I think you're going to have to do the same thing with Tampa Bay, where he can sit behind Shaq Barrett and Joe Tryon and, everyone else on that defense and learn a little bit of everything. And, it might take 2 whole seasons for him to become an elite pass rusher, but the wait will be worth it, and the payout could be massive. And, your new head coach is a defensive guy. So this pick makes sense. Whereas I think if it was Arian still, it may have been an offensive lineman. But I think, you look at the new coach, and I think Trayvon Walker really fits well. He should be ready to go by the time I think Shaq Barrett might be on his way out. So this really is a nice fit.
I just want to say that, like, despite the hype, if he falls to 27, you cannot run the ballot up faster. Right. We're just saying that the overhype is the 1 overall pick, but that's a huge difference.
I think, yeah, he's a steal here because of his physical upside, but I think analysts, as they tend to do, overreacted to the physical testing. I mean, I think him and Thibodeau are right next to each other, except Walker is a high end. He comes from the Georgia, which seems to produce high character all the time. And I think Thibodeau is more developed than Walker is. But Walker athletically as an edge who can play DB drills is just wild. But, you got to let him sit. And I think Tampa Bay has, Shaq Barrett there. They have Tryon as young. Even Levante David, if you decide and you get him in there that you want him to cut some weight and play a different position, he has the ability to do so. So I think, this makes so much sense. But the Packers, with their second pick, we have them taking George Pickens. We've had this, I think, every mock. It's going to be a receiver, most likely. It's, Pickens offers run blocking that no one else in this draft can at wide receiver. He's an elite deep ball tracker, which would pair really well with Rodgers. He's got good size, good speed. And, if he hadn't torn his ACL, maybe he's viewed as a top 3 receiver in this class. So to me, Pickens there's certainly a potential to slide to the second round, but I think the Packers want to run the ball more. And I think he offers them something that they may have not had before with his run blocking.
Good.
Do you want to? Okay.
Yeah.
This is next pick we had as our last mock as well. And we're actually starting to see this a little bit more in the mock drafts, and that's Kansas City taking Devin Lloyd. You can go ahead, Jack.
The Chiefs, with the top 4 corners off the board, it's hard to see them going corner with this pick. But you lost your emotional leader in Tyrann Mathieu, which is a whole separate issue. You lost Travarius Ward, and as it sits right now, your 1 corner is L'Jarius Sneed, and your 2 corner is Rashad Fenton. Now, are they bad corners? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I'm uncomfortable with that being your 1 and 2 in the bloodbath of the AFC West. However, I think that you can make that work, and the way to do that is by changing the way you approach the season defensively, and that's you need to give different looks on the front and generate pressure from your front. The quicker you get there, the less they got to cover, and they already have Chris Jones who can play tackler and Clark who can stand up or put his hand in the dirt. And if you add Lloyd to Gay and Bolton, the linebacker core, first off, that's probably right next to the 49ers for best young linebacking core. And Lloyd can play end, he can play linebacker. He is going to give you the opportunity to change up the looks and generate pressure in a way that Micah Parsons does for the Cowboys. Now, I think that Lloyd has some effort issues, and I think it shows on tape. However, if there's ever going to be a coach to take a chance on that, it's Andy Reid. And if he can get Lloyd's full potential out, or one of these veteran leaders can get him to play 100% every snap, you could be talking about the steal of the first round here.
I don't have anything to add to that. The Chiefs pick back-to-back, and they do end up getting their corner here. Roger McCreary, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah. So, yes, they do end up getting a corner because obviously it can't be ignored in the AFC. McCreary has fallen on my board where McDuffie and Booth have gone up a little bit due to various factors. McCreary, much like Pickett to us in terms of the quarterbacks, is a prospect that is ready to play now and can fill in as a nice 2 or 3. However, he does not have the upside in my eyes that the other 2 have. But for Kansas City, who seems to just be in win now mode all the time, having the guy that's ready to go is probably the best case scenario anyways. So McCreary steps in. He'll probably be the 2 with Fenton as the 3 and whatever. But it's just another body in a room that's probably not going to get fixed this offseason. You good?
Yep, I'm good.
At 31, we have the Bengals taking Zion Johnson out of Boston College. We were stuck on this pick for like 2 hours. We don't quite know what happened there. Just because their big glaring need is corner, but now all 5 of our top corners are off the board. And people are saying Tariq Woolen in the first. I watched a little bit of his tape. I still got some more to go, but I don't see it. If you take him in the first, it's purely on upside. He is not ready to play right now. And we thought that this was potentially a trade down. We thought that maybe the Giants trade Bradbury to come up, or our thoughts were all over the place on this one. But at the end of the day, we just have them sticking and taking Zion Johnson. They've done a really nice job of building the O-line this offseason, and Jackson Carman, it seems to be like the one piece from last year's line that somehow still has a starting job. And Johnson is a really solid run blocker, a little bit rougher in pass, but let him go in and compete because little competition never hurt anybody. And if he if he doesn't win the job, Carmen comes out with it. Johnson can play guard or tackle. So again, another situation where if you have a 6-man, at least he's got versatility down the line. You good?
Yeah, we were trying to think of a trade here, and because someone probably does want to move up for if they like Matt Corral, but it's just some of the teams are so far back that could use him. It just, I don't know, we couldn't find one, so we think that the Bengals stay put and continue protecting Burrow.
And with the last pick at 32, we had the Detroit Lions taking Dax Hill. So Detroit passes on corner at 2 or anyone in the secondary because Hutchinson falls, and that is a match made in heaven for Dan Campbell. Dax Hill, to me, is one of my favorite players coming out this year. Like when I hear the term playmaker, that is Dax Hill. And a lot of people regard Hill as a safety who can roll down the box. I see him as a corner who can roll back and play safety if you ask him to. Most of his film came from a nickelback spot. He can blitz. He's active in the run game, and he's a quality coverage corner. In short yardage and goal line, Michigan had Hill as their one corner. So it clearly shows that they have faith in him. Not a top prospect by any means. I think his size can get him in trouble when he's in man coverage, but the Lions are missing a legit threat in the secondary. I mean, Tracy Walker, Willis, Okuda, I mean, he'll sneeze and he'll probably tear something in his back. Owawari had an okay season, but at the end of the day, they need someone else to help that secondary, and Hill is going to come in and be that playmaker for them. Zach, anything?
Nope. This concludes our coverage of Mock 4.0. You can see a little bit more once the mock is posted on the website, and keep an eye out as the draft is quickly approaching.